Welcome back to Bleacher Brawls. My name is Derek. I'm here with John, and we're going to be doing a tier list, and we're going to be doing a tier list on all 30 MLB teams. Our last tier list was on the WBC Caps. However, this time we're going to cover all 30 MLB teams, and we're going to put them into 6 different tiers depending on the state of their franchise right now. And we're going to discuss them. The obvious ones, obviously, not too much to talk about, kind of gloss over some of the more obvious ones. And the ones that maybe need a little bit more debating, we'll talk about those. But let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into it. And this is your Bleacher Brawls MLB tier list. So this is our tier list. As you can see, there are 6 columns here on this tier list. And they're World Series favorite, contender, pushing for playoffs, retool / in transition, in a rebuild, and then what the F are you doing? They're kind of self-explanatory, right? The World Series favorites are the elite teams that are favorites. The contenders are teams that should be in the playoffs and could make a run for a World Series, but they're still not a favorite. The pushing for playoffs are the teams that you would figure to be in the wild card mix or maybe a weaker division winner. The retooling in transition is teams that are either retooling, looking to kind of bounce back towards the playoffs. Maybe they missed it last year, or maybe their team in transition. They're transitioning from an older core to a younger core. Then you have your full rebuild team that's in a rebuild, teams that are just that have totally torn it down and they're not trying to win now. They're focused on the future. And then you have the what the F are you doing? Just teams that no one has a clue what they're doing and why they're doing it. So we're going to start with the Toronto Blue Jays as they are the first team on the list. I'll hand it over to John first, and we'll alternate back and forth on these teams. So John, if you're looking at the Toronto Blue Jays, where would you put them in this tier list?
Well, they're certainly not a contender. I don't think they're at that level. I think they're a good team, but they're not a contender. And so that therefore, I think the Toronto Blue Jays are pushing for the playoffs. Not quite contender level yet, maybe on their way, but definitely making a playoff push.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd put them like the higher end of pushing for playoffs or the lower end of contender. That's where I see them. Next up, Baltimore Orioles, and I think there's a similar thing. Obviously, the Orioles were in this massive rebuild. They had a big year last year to kind of improve and get over 500. I think this Orioles team, similar spot to the Blue Jays, obviously maybe a little bit further behind in terms of the Blue Jays made the playoffs last year. The Orioles didn't, but the Orioles have a very bright future ahead of them. And I would think they're going to be trying to push for the playoffs. And a lot of these AL East teams are probably going to be in that pushing for playoff spot. Obviously, there's a lot of good AL East teams. John, you get the Tampa Bay Rays, unless you want to dispute that Orioles one.
The only thing I'll say about the Orioles, I think you're right. I think they're pushing for the playoffs. I don't actually think they make the playoffs again. I think they just fall just short because it's such a stacked AL East. So agree with pushing for the playoffs, but I don't think they make it. Tampa Bay Rays, they're a contender because, I don't know probably half the people on that team, but there's always a chance to end up in the World Series. I don't consider them World Series favorites, but I definitely consider them a contender.
Yeah, I mean, they're always in the postseason. I think people sleep on them too. They had a rough year last year, injury-wise, on a lot of high performances. I agree with that. Next up, my Boston Red Sox. Obviously, John will get his Yankees. I'm going to get my Red Sox. This one was very interesting. I really do want to put them in pushing for playoffs. However, I think they are doing both pushing for playoffs and retooling / in transition. I think more in transition is the right face for the Red Sox, and that's why I'm going to put them in the in transition part. Not that I don't think they can't push for the playoffs, but they are truly in transition from their older core that just left with Bogarts and Eovaldi and Martinez and all those guys. And even go back a couple of years to Benintendi, Betts, all those guys leaving. And now you have this kind of new core coming with Bayo and Casas. Even include Whitlock, Houck in that too. Yoshida's come in. And now you also look towards the farm system, guys like Meyer, York, Blaze, Rafaela, a lot of those younger guys trying to come up through Mata, all those young guys coming through the system. I think they are technically in that transition phase. They could push for the playoffs, definitely while being in that transition phase, but I think the in transition fits the description of the Red Sox the best.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be completely honest here. So hopefully Luke does not hear this because if he hears this, Luke, what WTF are you doing is how I feel about the Red Sox. Derek, between you and me, I think that's the perfect place to put the Red Sox, retooling in transition. Not to say they can't make the playoffs, but I don't think that's necessarily the goal this year.
Yeah, you have the New York Yankees. That's your team. Now I will just give you a heads up. I don't want to put like 5 teams in World Series favorite. Just giving that a heads up now. You can put them there if you want, because they're on the borderline for me between World Series favorite and contender. But That's up to you. I don't just putting that out there. I don't want to have like
For me
5, 6, 7, 8
personally,
teams.
there's only two World Series favorites. You can only have a favorite from one of each league. So for me, I only have two in mind. So that's if you take one or both of those, that'll be it. So the most we're probably going to have, I think, is three, because I think we agree on the World Series favorite for the AL East. I just put the Yankees as a contender. I wrote a column a couple days ago about this, about how I don't necessarily think they're a World Series contender. I think Barnes is going to dispute me in another column this week, so check it out. I personally consider them a contender. They can make noise. They can win the World Series, but I don't think they're the favorites.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? And I think we all know who that favorite, like from the AL, is definitely going to be. I mean, there's a team that did just win a World Series, not to give too much away. Moving next is the Cleveland Guardians, and this one was very interesting for me to try and decide whether I'd put them in pushing for playoffs or contender because I do feel they are a weaker division winner. However, I feel way too confident in their ability in that division to win that division where I feel like I have to put them in contender. Now, over in the grand scheme of things, I think this Cleveland team is going to be really good. I think they're, as long as they stay healthy, their pitching is really good. They have a good system there. They have one of the best managers in baseball. Are they your typical contending team? No. But I feel like putting them in the push for playoffs just isn't like I feel like that's almost a little disrespectful to them.
That's a good point because I was sitting here thinking there's no way they're a contender, but I think you make a good point about describing why you put them in the contenders. For me, I look at that AL Central as three teams pushing to win it, and whoever makes that is making the playoffs. I don't know if personally I don't consider any Central team as a really contender. I guess we could get into that more later. I think they're just going. I think every AL Central team is a step below pretty much every AL East team, and with exceptions, but it's a general statement. So that whole preamble leads into the Kansas City Royals, which is my next pick. And I put them in a rebuild. I don't see them doing anything this year, but that organization has proven that they can put together a winning team. Therefore, they don't get the WTF are you doing? They're just in a rebuild because you have to have that long. Won a World Series and made another.
You know what I'm going to actually do? I might add another column. I'm not gonna lie, because I want to put a column in here that fits the Chicago White Sox perfectly. We're gonna add a row above here. And then we're gonna make this row the boomer bust row.
Oh yeah, there you go.
I knew I was gonna do this. I just wanted to save this just so it would be like, oh, this new thing. No, the Chicago White Sox are going in boomer bust, and I'm actually gonna change the color because that's gonna bother me. They're going in boomer bust because I feel like this White Sox team has been so injury prone where they gotta win at some point, right? And if they don't win, you gotta consider maybe tearing it down and maybe starting some sort of rebuild, right? And they have pieces where they may move some pieces off. They can really, really do a rebuild. Their farm system is pretty much shot. Their farm system is Colson Montgomery, and that's it. Nothing, right? So I think when you look at this White Sox team, they have a lot of injuries and they can't really put it together, especially if they finish behind both the Guardians and Twins in this division. I feel like it is boom or bust. It's either you have a good year and you keep on trying to win, or if you have a rough year, you maybe have to start looking for a rebuild.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think they're either winning the division or coming in like third or fourth place, and it's going to be ugly when that happens. So, boomer bust is a great description of the White Sox. Is I don't see anything. Those are the only two options: make the play, win the division, or just fall apart. So that leads me into the Detroit Tigers. I don't know much about their farm system. In my lifetime, the Tigers won a World Series when I was 2 years old. And they've made a couple others, but they've never really figured it out. I don't know what's going on out there in Detroit, so I'm personally going to put them under WTF are you doing? Derek, I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Honestly, I kind of did this exercise myself, like before we came on the record, just to see where I would kind of place all these teams, and that's exactly where I put the Tigers. And what the F are you doing? Because it's like I don't know what they're doing. Like they brought in Javi Baez, Eduardo Rodriguez, they traded for Austin Meadows, and they just had a terrible year last year, right? And it feels like they're kind of in a rebuild, but they're trying to like accelerate their rebuild by paying guys a bunch of money. That doesn't necessarily make sense to do that, right? So I feel like that's an appropriate spot for them. Next up, though, Minnesota Twins. I feel like this is the AL Central team that's going to go in the pushing for playoff section. For me personally, the Twins team, you go out and get Correa, and you go out and trade for Pablo Lopez, and you trade away Luis Arias, who was a big part of your team last year. You're pushing for the playoffs. They're not a contender, but I could see the Twins maybe being sneaky, maybe sneaking up into a wild card spot. It wouldn't surprise me if the Twins did that.
You forgot their other big acquisition in the offseason. Our good friend Joey Gallo.
Yes, Joey Gallo.
The Twins, I think Rocco Baldelli is still the manager out there unless something happened and I missed it. But I got a little bit of faith in them. They always the Twins have overachieved a few times, at least overachieved my expectations of them a few times over the years. So I think I don't consider them a contender. So yeah, I guess pushing for playoffs is. Oh, that whole long talk was just to say I agree with you, pushing for playoffs.
Yes, 100%. The Minnesota Twins are back up on board, and as you're watching this video, you already know, but we just saw it live. Shohei Ohtani just struck out Mike Trout for Japan to win the WBC. So congrats to Japan. Let's move on to the guy who Ohtani and Trout both play for. Perfect timing somehow. Actually, the LA Angels. John, where are you putting them?
What the F are you doing? This team has underachieved forever. And there you go. You have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani playing in the most important game of their entire careers, and it's not for the Angels. That franchise makes me sick, and they've wasted two Hall of Fame generational talents who've never played in the playoffs. And here they are in the biggest moment of their careers, and it wasn't for the Angels. What the F are you doing?
Yeah.
The Angels. Sorry, I almost called them the California Angels. Of course I haven't.
There's the two arguments. It's either Angels and what the F are you doing, or they're in boom or bust. Because if they don't win this year, Ohtani's gone, right? So they're kind of in one of those two spots automatically. But I think what the F are you doing fits them kind of perfectly, because it's like, how are you losing and being terrible with Trout and Ohtani? I don't know how. Next up, though, the Houston Astros. This one might be the most obvious one. It'll let me drag it all the way up. I'm using my laptop. My laptop's mouse pad doesn't like me. It goes slow. But the Astros are in World Series favorites. They just won the World Series. What do you want me to say? Like, come on, they won the World Series. They're World Series favorites.
Yeah, and I mean, if they're not, they're gonna even with the Altuve injury, they're gonna find a way to cheat around it. So. All right, no more shots at the Astros. I'll say the A's. Derek, I'm not 100% familiar with their farm system. It feels like they're always in a rebuild. They're not retooling. They're not transitioning. Certainly not boom or bust, and I don't feel like they're pushing for the playoffs. I'll put them in a rebuild because occasionally they do figure it out and make the playoffs. But if you feel differently, let's hear it.
No, I think that's where I have them. I think that's where they fit perfectly. So I'm not going to argue that. I think that's exactly where I had them. For me, Seattle Mariners, this one is very interesting. I'm going to put them in the pushing for playoffs, right near the top with the Blue Jays in the pushing for playoffs section. Because they're close to being contenders, but not yet. They also have to deal with the Astros in that division, which that's not a fun thing to have to deal with. So for the Mariners, I think it's pushing for playoffs. It's hard for me to justify putting more than one team in a contender and a contender in a division like the AL West, where only one team has been proven that they can actually make a run at the division title. Because the Mariners made a wild card last year, but they're still nowhere near the Astros, and no one was near the Astros. So I feel like the Mariners have to go and pushing for playoffs.
I mean, I think right now our tier list looks good because the Astros are better than the Yankees, Rays, or Guardians. The Yankees, Rays, and Guardians, I think, win the playoff series against the Blue Jays, Mariners, Orioles, and Twins. So I think it's a fair place to put them.
Yeah.
And that leaves us last with the Texas Rangers, as I'm down here in Texas with all you fake fans who are now Houston Astro fans that used to be Texas Rangers fans that were probably Astros fans before that. It's pathetic, and I have no respect for any of you. And that's why I put the Texas Rangers in boomer bust with the White Sox, because you have all these pitchers, but they're all injury prone. I mean, maybe you strike lightning, and a couple of these guys, you can't even think there's a chance in heck any of these guys, all of these guys are going to stay healthy. The best you
Yeah.
could hope for is a couple of them stay healthy, and I don't even see that happening. So maybe you make the playoffs, maybe you finish behind the Oakland Athletics.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's got to be fair, honestly. Next up, we're going to move on to the National League now. The Atlanta Braves, and I'm going to put them into contender. They won their division last year, 100 wins, 101 wins. I mean, yes, they lost Dansby Swanson. Guess what? Like, they figure it out. It's the Atlanta Braves. They'll figure it out. I know Orlando Arcia is going to be their opening day shortstop, and it seems like Vaughn Grissom starting the season in the minor leagues, but they'll figure it out. They're the Atlanta Braves. They'll figure something out. In worst case scenario, they'll have to trade for a guy at the deadline. They'll be fine. So they're in contender.
They're my personal pick to go to the World Series out of the National League. I know it's rare and it doesn't happen very often that you get back-to-back pennant winners. But I think if any team can do it,
well, they didn't win the pennant last year. The Phillies won it.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, there you go. Sorry. Well, so there you go. Even less. So anyway, they're my pick for the World Series.
All right. We'll discuss that later. We'll just get the whole list sorted out, and then we'll discuss if we want to move anything, be kind of specific to that. You got the Miami Marlins up next.
In a perpetual rebuild. I don't want to say what the F are you doing, because there's a ton of talent in that system, but for whatever reason, they just can't get them all on the same team at the same time. So in a rebuild.
I know this one I would actually argue. I will actually argue.
No, let's hear it. That's good.
I think they should be in what the F are you doing, because they have so much talent, but they can never put it all together. They have too much talent to be in a rebuild, right? They're not boomer bust because they haven't proved that they can win anything recently. They're definitely not in a retool, and they're not in any transition of any type. They're not pushing for the players, not contenders, and they're not World Series. I feel like what the F you're doing is like the Marlins of like, you have Alcantara, you have so much pitching, but you cannot get any bats, and like they neglect the fact that they need offense. So for me, I would personally put them in what the F are you doing.
And I'm fine with that, because honestly, Derek Jeter does not own them anymore. Don Mattingly's not the manager, so I have no reason to protect the Marlins or defend the Marlins. Yeah, I mean, what the F are you doing? It's fair.
Yeah, that's where I would end up putting them. Next up, the New York Mets. Similar to the Braves, they're going in the contender. They're placed DeGrom with Verlander, which when you talk about potentially being healthy, I think Verlander has a better shot at staying healthy, but it's not like necessarily a upgrade or downgrade. I think it's just like they're somewhat similar. DeGrom can be more dominant, but Verlander has a better chance of staying healthy. So, you give and take. But yeah, I can't put them in World Series favorite just because it's like similar with the Braves, and we'll probably, I don't know about the Phillies coming up. I know I do have the Phillies, but can you really put a team in that division as a World Series favorite in a sense where it's like, do you know if they're going to win the division? You can, but my only worry is that, yeah, one of those teams ends up in a wild card like the Mets did last year, and you run into a team like the Padres because they couldn't beat the Dodgers, and then it's like, oh crap.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they're going to get past this Diaz injury. You have an owner that's not going to be afraid to spend money. I think the Mets are going to be contenders from here on out for a very long time. One team I don't think is going to be contenders anytime soon for a very long time, is the Washington Nationals. What the F are you doing? I think this is a team that just they're going nowhere anytime soon. They've developed a few players throughout their history, but they don't necessarily, like Bryce Harper. They developed Bryce Harper, he left. They sort of developed Steven Strasburg, however you kind of want to look at that. And they kept him for an exorbitant price. And I think he's pitched like 4 innings since then. So this is a team that is they got their heads so far up their butt, they're looking at their lunch.
You look at all their talent that have come up through their system with Harper, Strasburg, Trey Turner, Juan Soto, Anthony Rendon. None of them are there anymore. And it's like, it's like, yeah, well, like, none of them are there anymore. Well, I mean, Strasburg's still there, but let's be honest. Can we really say Strasburg's there? Because what has he been there? Has he done anything for them in the last couple seasons? No. So like they're not getting any production from any of those guys. They're either all gone or they're just or you have Strasburg who's injured. So that's fair. It's either that or in a rebuild but their rebuild is like, oh, we traded Juan Soto for some guys, and that's I guess our farm system was just the guys we got back from the Padres. But yeah, that's probably about right. It's one of those two rows. For the Phillies, they're going in contender. Oops, I don't know, just hovered over the wrong thing. But the Phillies are they got to go in contender. I mean, they made it to the World Series last year. The division's kind of a little tough for me to want to put them in the World Series favor. Also, too, like they didn't even win 90 games last year. So it's not saying they could obviously make another run, make it to the World Series, but I think for me, they have to go in contender. But I do want to say the Milwaukee Brewers, I'm very interested to see where you put them because I feel like there's only one row I would put them in.
Yeah, I mean, you want to flip flop? You can take the
Yeah,
Milwaukee Brewers thing because I don't know enough about the Brewers, and I'd love to hear your take on it.
I'm putting the Milwaukee Brewers in boom or bust. They already traded Josh Hader. Corbin Burns is going to want a payday. Brandon Woodruff is going to want a payday. You're already paying Yelich a bunch of money, and he's struggling. Willie Adames is going to be a free agent. Like they have so many. They do have a lot of good players, but like they're going to be free agents soon, and the Brewers aren't the team to pay those guys. The Brewers normally are not that going to be that team to pay them. They'll maybe pay one or two, but they will not pay all of them. So they're going to have to either put their eggs in just one guy's basket, hope they win, or they're going to have to start looking. Well, we're already going to start incorporating some of our young guys. If this year doesn't go well, maybe we look at trading the Corbin Burns or a Brandon Woodruff or a Willie Adames or a Devin Williams or someone like that. I think this could be a boom or bust year, a make or break year for the Brewers in whether or not they end up going into a rebuild.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I don't know enough, so you definitely educated me on the Brewers. I can't say I'm following them particularly closely. A team I'm not following particularly closely, though I do keep tabs on them simply because I don't like them, is the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't know why, guys. I can't explain this. I don't like the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't like the fans. And I've met fans that I like, and they're like, wow, these are nice people. But there's something about the Cardinals I don't like. I've never liked. So it's hard for me to say this because I really want to kind of go a little hard on the Cardinals. But I think they're pushing for the playoffs. Someone needs to win that division. To me, I don't know if it's let's say the Milwaukee Brewers go bust. Someone needs to win the division. It's not going to be the Pirates or the Reds. Unlikely to be the Cubs. So Cardinals are making the playoffs by default.
So they're going to be pushing for playoffs.
Yeah, that's where I would put them.
Yeah, by default. So we switched around. So you're going to end up. You still have the Cubs. I'll give you the Cubs. That's where you would have had anyway. So you take. The
Okay,
Cubs.
so for me, I'll say with the Cubs that they're a retool in transition. I think they're a team that's getting close. They made some decent moves. I think that Bellinger move is actually going to pay off for them. I think the change of scenery is going to be pretty good. And hitter friendly park. And honestly, at the end of the day, kind of a weak division when you got the Pirates and Reds in your division and the Brewers who could potentially go bust and the Cardinals that aren't that strong. Cubs are in a good position to make a move in the next year or two. I just don't think they're quite there yet.
Yeah, that's actually exactly where I have them.
I don't like the Cubs either. I do not like the Cubs. I've been to Wrigley Field, great place and all. I don't like the Cubs. I really hope this retool transition falls flat on your faces, Cubs fans.
All right, next up is the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're going in rebuild. I think Brian Reynolds might have to get traded, which is kind of going to screw with their rebuild. There's a lot of talent there. O'Neal Cruz has all the potential in the world. Keep Brian Hayes, I'm very high on. I think there's a chance he takes a Gold Glove away from Arenado this year, and that means he might even win a Platinum Glove. That he's that good defensively. You got David Bednar, who maybe they trade. A good reliever with control up. Maybe they trade and bring in more prospects for the rebuild, right? There is a lot of talent there, and especially if you trade Brian Reynolds, you're getting another haul back. There's talent there. It's just got to grow, but they're definitely in a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be borderline okay putting them in what the F are you doing because of the way that ownership runs the team. But like you said, there is a ton of young talent there. And Key Brian Hayes, obviously Charlie Hayes caught the final out of the 1996 World Series, first World Series I ever saw in my lifetime. So there's always a soft spot in my heart for the Hayes family. I hope this kid's fantastic.
Yep.
I guess
Next up, you got the Cincinnati Reds.
Cincinnati Reds. That's what the F are you doing? That's a team that's been horrible forever. They can't seem to figure it out. I know they have some upcoming prospects. I know you personally are high on Ellie De La Cruz, but that's a team that has to show me something if you want me to believe in you. And it's a shame because I believe they might be like the longest running consecutive baseball franchise. Like it's them or the Pirates. One stopped for a while. So I mean, you have this long history, but the most recent long history is just ugly.
Yeah, like you look at just heading into 22, it's like, yeah, they're on a rebuild, but you look towards like the last like 4 or 5, it's like they've wasted Joey Votto's career. And it's just like, what the heck are you doing, guys? It's like you can't win. It's like even when you start to get close to the playoffs, it's not good enough. And then it's just the franchise is kind of a mess right now. And yeah, they have some good prospects coming through the system, but it's still like, what are they doing, right? Like, I don't know. But yeah, next up, Arizona Diamondbacks. This one's easy for me. They're going in the retool / in transition. I think they're in transition. They're bringing up a lot of their young core that's been in the minor leagues, and that D-backs fans are probably really excited about. I'm really excited about this young D-backs core that they have coming. Obviously, they traded Dalton Varsho, but they brought in Gabriel Moreno, who will get a lot of playing time now that Carson Kelly just got injured. Look at that outfield with Corbin Carroll, Alec Thomas, Jake McCarthy. It's a lot of good guys in the outfield. And in the infield, Ketel Marte, my favorite non-Red Sox player in the big leagues. You have Josh Rojas. I love some Josh Rojas as well. They brought in Longoria. Christian Walker is very good with the glove at first base and brings some power. Shortstop's the only kind of question mark they have, I think, but they could be a very sneaky team. And Zach Gallen, I think, is a kind of dark horse Cy Young guy. I mean, he had a outrageous second half of last year. So for me, they go in they're in the in transition tier.
All right. Well, for me, next up, I got the Dodgers, and I think a lot of people have them as World Series favorites. I personally said my World Series favorite was the Braves, so therefore I can't put them in the World Series favorite. I put them in contender because I think, of course, they're a contender. Though, and I'll let you speak to this more. I know you had the hot take in one of your blog posts on BleacherBrawls.com saying that the Dodgers could potentially miss the playoffs. I know you don't think that's going to happen, but
I can see the possibility of it, though.
Yes,
I could see the possibility of it happening. Like their rotation has some injury question marks, and they got to rely on their young guys too early in the season where they don't want to necessarily have to rely on them, and then those guys struggle. I mean, you finish second in that division to the Padres, and then you have 2 NL East teams in a wild card spot. You only get 1 wild card spot left. If an NL Central team like the Brewers, and both the Brewers and Cardinals are really good, or a team like the D-backs comes up and surprises people, it's not out of the world that it's not like out of the realm of possibilities that the Dodgers could just miss out on a playoff spot. Is it likely? No, but like it's a possibility. Like I could definitely see happening, but it's not likely.
The injury bug strikes, man. And you start falling behind early on in the season, it's going to be hard to catch up. So yes, I think it's a possibility too. But I don't have them down as World Series favorites. I have them down as
Yeah. Next up is the San Francisco Giants. For me, they're in that kind of retool / in transition. They brought in some guys, nothing crazy. They did try and get Judge and try to get Correa, and they would have had Correa had he not failed his physical. But they brought in Mitch Haniger, Michael Conforto. They brought in some starters. I love Camille Duvall in the back end of their bullpen. I love Logan Webb as their ace. They did lose Rodon. So it's very kind of they are in a in transition team. I don't think they're necessarily in a transition team from like a young core, old core to a young core. I think they're more in transition in the sense of they're bringing a new group of guys. They're going to see if it works, but I think they could be in transition towards kind of getting a little bit towards an actual like a legit like a retooling, like where you maybe move some of your veteran guys and bring in some other guys to replace them and kind of mix and match and do what the Giants have done over the last couple of years, and maybe you get a 2021 season where you have a really good year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the Mitch Haniger move, and I'm just blanked on the other move they made in the offseason, but I remember kind of liking that too. I do think Mitch Haniger is going to be a good fit there. but I think there's a chance they're sellers at the deadline. So yeah, transitions to place
Yeah,
to play.
could even be in transition to a full blown rebuild. Who knows?
For me, the Padres are up next, and I'm putting the Padres in contender. I could see it going boom or bust with them. Like it just sometimes your franchises have bad luck, and they seem to be one of those franchises with bad luck, kind of like Mets luck. Um, but that being said, I don't think it's likely. I still think they make the playoffs. They really have a stacked roster. So again, like I put them in contender. Maybe some people have them as World Series contender, but for me, if nothing else, just contender or World Series favorite, and I just have them as contender.
Yeah. Colorado Rockies, they're going in the what the F are you doing category for me. I made that category specifically for the Rockies. I'm not gonna lie. Because every time I look at the Rockies, I just go, what the F are you doing? Like, no one knows what their plan is. And it's so infuriating because it's just like, I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know if they're like, are they trying to win games? Are they not trying to win? They're trying to rebuild? Are they like, I have no clue what the plan is, right? Because they have some nice prospects like a Zach Veen, but they also have like, they signed Chris Bryant to a big deal and they have a Herman Marquez who's got owed 31 million over the next 2 years, and he's really good outside of course, but he's god awful at course, which is his home ballpark. Which it's this is a team that just doesn't make any sense to me, right? And they just signed Jerks and Profar, so a 1 year deal worth what 8 million or whatever it is. Like, I guess he had nowhere else to sign. Maybe just flip him at the deadline, but it's I don't know. This team just I have no clue, honestly. Yeah. As we end this off, though, that's all 30 teams. Is there any team you would like to move?
So I mean, we don't necessarily have to move it, but I do have an opinion on the Philadelphia Phillies. For me, I actually would personally look at them as a more boomer bust team. Like you mentioned, I don't even think they won 90 games last year. I
Yeah,
think they got really hot. They went on a good run. I don't see them replicating that run this season. You have the Mets and Braves who are both
I'm not
better.
against that though. Their prospect system isn't like massive, right? And Aaron Nola's a free agent at the end of the year. You lose him, like you could run into. I know they have Andrew Painter, who's one of the most highly touted starters in the minors, but it's also like cool, but like you also just got injured in spring training, and you never know with these kind of things, right? I think boomer bust. I'm not against that at all. I think I probably would have leaned towards contender, but honestly, I'm fine, totally fine putting them boomer bust.
I
What
can
we'll do,
see
I'll
it
also
going really, really wrong in Philly. And when
yes,
things
I
go
can.
really, really wrong in Philly, I don't care which
I
sports team
Dave
it is.
Dombrowski like gets the boot, and they bring in some other guy who his team is like, all right, move on from like some of the bad contracts. Maybe it's like a Taiwan Walker's contract needs to get moved and whatever. I can see it happening. I'll put the Braves up in World Series favorite. Honestly, I don't really have a favorite for the NL. I know you said that the Braves would probably be your favorite. So I'm fine putting them there. I look at this. Let me see. I'm trying to look at this and see what I like.
Just
What I
by
would
no, go ahead, you go first.
I would consider putting the Nationals in a rebuild, because although we don't like it's like what the F are they doing is kind of true. We do also know, hey, they're in a full blown rebuild and they're not trying to win at any point in time. Also the Angels I consider boomer bust for them. Just because it is kind of a boomer bust year for them.
Yeah, and that's fine. And for me, I would actually like I don't think the Mets are boomer bust. I think the Mets are a contender. But based off Mets history, based off Mets luck, things can go bust really quick. So
That is
Mets
true.
fans, like you've had a rough, rough time. I mean, growing up as a kid, I didn't like listening to you talk about how great the Mets were when the Yankees were terrible. But you suffered a lot since then, so I guess I shouldn't hold too much of a grudge. We'll leave the Mets as contenders, but like it can go bust because it's the Mets.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the only thing that originally coming into this, I thought I was gonna have the Rays and Blue Jays flip flop, but the more and more I do look at their rosters, the more and more I like the Rays. I mean, maybe it's just because I really like the Rays pitching, and then you also know like they just have a lab in the Everglades where they just pull some random guy that was working at like a Dunkin' Donuts out of there, and he ends up throwing like a 98 with a wipeout slider. And it's like, where the heck did this guy come from? And then that's just like the Rays for you. Um, And I think the Rays last year were kind of had a lot of like really bad injuries, like where guys are out for like a month or two. It's like Manny Margot was hitting 300, gets injured, out for like a month or so. Wander Franco missed a lot of time. Brandon Lau missed a lot of time. Like Kiermaier, he's gone, but he got injured, right? And the Blue Jays have kind of gone for a full philosophy shift where get Hernandez out, get Gurriel out, bring in Kiermaier, bring in Varsho. Both are really good defensive outfielders. But isn't necessarily going to pay off. Now they both do also hit lefty because they were a very righty heavy line with also running Brandon Belt, another lefty. I just don't know if it's going to totally work out. I did say this on a Twitter space, actually, though. I'll say it not here. If there is if like you're looking at teams to go after Ohtani, like the Blue Jays actually might not be like the total like craziest one because they could give up like a Ricky Tiedemann plus a couple other pieces, plus like three other pieces, maybe four other pieces, and maybe try and make a run for Ohtani at the deadline if the Angels are bad. But I think pushing for plays because I don't know if their philosophy change is actually going to work.
Do you know if Ohtani has a no trade clause?
No, he doesn't have a no trade.
Okay, yeah, then that can happen.
Yeah. All right. Are we all good with this tier list and how it looks then?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good even. It's kind of even and fair, definitely.
All right. Well, there we go. That is your MLB tier list where we ranked all 30 teams into 7 different tiers. So yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree, disagree, anywhere in the middle? Let us know. Make sure to check out all our links in the description, the Bleacher Brawls website, podcast, Instagram, and Twitter. This video's going up on Wednesday, the 22nd. So that means I have a column going up on covering UFC 286, which was this past weekend. So check that out. Check out all the other columns up there. For John, my name is Derek. Thanks for tuning in to Bleacher Brawls, and we'll see you next time.